Welcome to this tutorial in the Introduction to Mongoose video training series. In this tutorial, we will be talking about how to set user preferences, especially some preferences that are key for form developers, the importance of themes to the Mongoose user interface, and how to modify a theme to help make our work as developers more efficient. As you have no doubt realized by now, Mongoose is a highly customizable and flexible piece of software. One of the key aspects to customizing and personalizing your Mongoose experience is the user preference settings. Your preferences as a form and application developer and an end user's preferences are likely to be fairly different though, and that is what we want to talk about in this tutorial. User preferences are set in the User Preferences dialog box. To open this dialog box, we go to the System menu, then the View submenu, and then select User Preferences. When the User Preferences dialog box opens, notice first that there are 5 tabs across the top. As you can see, there are a lot of preference options here. These options control many aspects of how Mongoose looks and behaves, including form presentation and display, system runtime behaviors, use of themes, design mode appearance and options, application event system options and behavior, and much more. Now obviously we do not have time to look at every option on each tab, and besides there's no need. The context-sensitive online help is always there if you need to know what a particular option does. What we are going to do is zero in on some of the more important options, especially for a developer environment. That being said, let's start with the Runtime Layout tab. This tab has 3 options, 2 of which are particularly significant for us as developers: the Tabbed Form Layout option and the Themes option. Let's start with the Tabbed Form Layout option. If you'll notice, the Tabbed Form Layout option is selected by default when you first install and configure Mongoose. That means that the Tabbed Form Layout is what we have been looking at so far. And what that means is that if we have 2 or more forms open at one time, each form has its own tab in the workspace, and we can switch back and forth from one form to another by selecting the tabs. Notice also that each form in this mode takes up the entire workspace, so we can only view one form at a time. Let's see what happens if we clear the Tabbed Form Layout option in the User Preferences dialog box. If we have forms open, Mongoose warns us that those forms must be closed before this option can be applied. We click OK and then reopen the forms we had open originally. Now when we open multiple forms, notice what happens. Instead of the forms taking up the entire workspace, each having its own tab, each form opens in its own window, and the windows cascade so that we can see in that way what forms are open. To view each form then, we simply click the window for that form. Or if we want, we can move them around and set them up possibly so that we can view them side by side. Notice too that not all forms are the same size. Each form now displays at its defined size. This is one of the main reasons we want not to use the Tabbed Form Layout. We want to see and work with forms at their real sizes. It's time now for you to start setting up your own development environment like the one we will be using throughout the rest of this series of tutorials. You are, of course, free ultimately to set your environment up any way you want, but we strongly recommend that while you are working your way through these tutorials, you set your environment to be exactly the same as ours. It will make things a lot easier in the long run. We will do this with a series of short exercises in which we will give you the steps and specifications to set your system up to match ours. In this first one, you will set your user preferences to use the non-tabbed layout for forms. Here are the steps. When you are finished and ready to go on, click Go On. The second option we are concerned with on the Runtime Layout tab is the Theme option. In Mongoose, themes basically control the appearance of fonts, colors, and some other aspects of display and presentation in the user interface. Themes are somewhat similar to cascading style sheets in HTML, helping you control the look and feel of the user interface using inherited attributes. Mongoose comes with two themes built in, which you can use as is, or you can extend and customize them to your own tastes. Or, if you're really ambitious, you can create your own themes from scratch. One of the two built-in themes is named Infor. This is the default theme, and it implements current Infor styling standards. The other built-in theme is named Classic. The Classic theme reproduces, as much as possible, the look and feel of previous releases of Mongoose for those who do not want to change over to the newer look and feel of the Infor theme. But what exactly are we talking about here? What are the specific differences between the two themes? Let's do a quick comparison of the two themes. Let's take a look at the user's form as it appears in the Infor theme and the Classic theme. One of the first differences you should notice is that the menu bar now displays an entirely different set of menus in the Classic theme. These are actually the same as the sub-menus of the system menu in the Infor theme, just laid out differently. But notice too that the Master Explorer and My Folders menus no longer display as menus. If you want to see them, you must select the Explorer option from the View menu. And then, when you do that, notice that the Explorer options now display in their own dockable window, with options to select which version of the Explorer you want to view. Finally, notice the differences in such features as required fields, a yellow background versus a red asterisk, notebook tabs, outlined versus not outlined, group boxes, bordered versus borderless, just to point out a few. As we mentioned before, you can extend or customize these existing themes to your own tastes, and you can also create your own themes from the ground up. Let's take a moment to customize the Infor theme for our purposes as developers. What we're going to do is use the basic Infor theme but override the menu display. We start by making sure that the Infor theme is selected, then we click Edit. This opens the theme editor. If we take a look at the sorts of things that can be controlled and customized independently by a theme, we see such things as all user interface elements, including forms and other user interface elements, all forms, including all their components, all form component types, and even individual component types, such as buttons, grids, notebooks and tabs, group boxes, and so on. Notice as we select various types of components that in the middle pane we can see a preview of what effect our changes will have on some, but not all, of the component types. Notice too that many of the properties and attributes we can control with the theme editor are the same or similar for all the possible elements. For instance, virtually every user interface element has at least the properties for fonts, family, size, and style, and for foreground colors, which controls the color of the font, among other things, and the background colors. Other properties or attributes, on the other hand, might be unique to a particular component type or whatever. For example, the tile background color option is unique to forms. Okay, well, we are going to leave almost all of the styles options for the Infor theme intact because we want our forms to use the default Infor styling. However, there are other aspects of the user interface that we can also control using the Options tab in the theme editor. Clicking the Options tab, we find 4 options available that are not directly related to the styling options we have looked at so far. It is the first option, the Explore Style option, that we are interested in here. Notice that by default, the Infor theme uses the menu styling for the Mongoose Explorer. We've already seen those menus across the top of the user interface. But during form and application development, Explorer shortcuts do not yet exist for the forms we are creating, so the Explorer menus are not really going to be much help to us. Not only that, but with the Infor theme's menu bar arrangement, we are forced to select the system menu to get to any of what are really the other primary menus: the form menu, the edit menu, the view menu, and so on. The classic menu arrangement makes it much easier to access those menus, which we will be doing a lot as developers by moving them to the top. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to use the best of both worlds? This first option here allows us to do just that. Keep the Infor theme's styling standards for the most part, but allow us to use the Explorer in a dockable window, like the Classic theme. All we have to do is select Classic from the Explorer Style drop-down list. This configuration is much more efficient for most development work. That's all we're going to do in the theme editor, so we can click OK and return to the User Preferences dialog box. Before we finish with the User Preferences dialog box, there is one more option that we want to make sure is selected. Going back to the Runtime Behaviors tab, we locate the option labeled Unload IDO Metadata with Forms and verify that it is selected. Since it is selected by default, it should already be selected. But if it should be not selected for some reason, we want to make sure it is selected. Why? In brief, because as you are developing forms in Mongoose, from time to time you will need to tell Mongoose to clear and refresh its metadata cache. This helps keep things from getting out of whack. This option tells Mongoose to also clear and refresh the metadata cache for the IDO runtime service. Believe us when we tell you that this is something you will need to do often. We'll see it in action later. Well, as we said before, we do not have enough time to explain all the other options in the User Preferences dialog box, but the online help has complete explanations for all of them. We encourage you to check out the documentation, explore all these options, and set them to your own liking. Before we move on to our next exercise though, we should point out that when you sign out after making changes to your user preferences, the system asks you to confirm that you want to save those changes. If you don't want to have to change things back every time you sign in, we recommend that you save your changes, overriding the lock warning if necessary. In this second exercise, you will modify the Infor theme to use the Classic menu option. You will also verify that your Unload IDO Metadata with Forms option is set correctly. When you are finished and ready to go on, click Go On. Looking back, in this tutorial, we looked at how to set user preferences using the User Preferences dialog box. We made some key settings that are helpful to form developers. We explored the use of themes and some of their options, and we modified the Infor theme a bit to help make our work as developers more efficient. So, what's next? In the next tutorial in this series, we are going to learn about the Access As identifier and the unique contributions it makes to form and application development work. For more information, including more tutorials and complete documentation, visit our Mongoose portal at https://mongoose.infor.com/portal. For technical support, visit the Infor Extreme support website at https://www.inforextreme.com and log an incident there. Or feel free to contact us with your questions and comments at mongoose@infor.com. That's it for this tutorial. Until next time then, have a great Mongoose day.